Shadows pirouetted in brilliant trickery, waltzing before her eyes from volcanic rock. In pirouettes her eyes spun a polished web of light, pirouetted on wave points, passing beyond her grasp, pivoting in spirals, and air rapidly arose over a high tide. The Pacific rested in reluctant repose, pointing its cool body toward the rocks, toward a painted sand that gravity had torched. In lemon and in light flavour she stood in the sea's zest, where her eyeline gazed at a rippled shore. The wind brushed her hair. Beneath the sun, the wind brought salt to her lips, and her tongue tasted its fullness. The wind spoke her name. While porous, megalithic shadows eclipsed sea, a darkness rode the water. She dove beneath waves, and her body's font fractured them, splintering the soft silk of water's touch. Her fingers fanned the blue in early evening, and her eyes saw a dusky moon. A horizon reflected in her eyes. In the horizon her eyes reflected a solitary star, burning brighter than any sun, whose name she kept silent. From innocence her mouth formed adoring arias. The smooth style her tongue sang wordlessly in subtle expression of time. The volume from ocean rang into space, hung by years, circling Luna light. The sun's duration became serenaded with a choir of cicadas that both lived and died. There is trickery in the cicada's song. Over the cove where she swam, they do not sing. Their sound filled her ears when wings rubbed together, beating percussion, rising and falling to the sun's last heat. And the waves carried the sound of an old clave through air to a passionate salsa danced in her stomach. A cantata of bird language resounded when suddenly she smelt whiteness, his presence, through a channel of oxygen lifted to her, his odour. Her lungs filled and her diaphragm opened. She turned back then, if only to face the shore. Through wind, over waves, he said. He had been walking in sunflower fields, reading Catcher in the Rye, decorated with a Greek fisherman's hat. He had remembered his grandfather called him a bohemian. Shadows glided over water to her, carrying his voice in musical notes, sky of pink and blue joining together, always a whirling scent of sunlight. In parlante, through fingered space he called, "When a boy meets a girl in the fields, I will smile at you forever, until your salty tears of loss become clear tears of joy. Remember, Burns, remember me, when a body is needed." Now in stillness she stood, beneath the moon, in sea foam, facing shadows, facing the shore. She fingered strings of colour. The flower of her heart sang a silent soprano. Distance will not make us blind. Distance will not make us blind. He responded to her call. To her call he called, "The sea is only moon tears between us. My eyes, I will face the moon." In purity, her mouth formed an adoring Don aria. Over the waves, her voice climbed in the wind, chiming in laughter. She returned his brightest smile, carrying the odour of his spirit, gifted from his favourite flowers. Seaweed and sand braided their ocean jewellery in her hair. She went deep under the sea, the sky her palette, her garment of grace changed light through air. Venus rose and he disappeared. And he dreamt her in his night bed while she swam in day sea alone. Solo she stood, Shadows pirouetting in trickery, shadows pirouetting in brilliance, waltzing before her eyes from volcanic rock. In pirouettes, her eyes spun a polished web of light on wave points, passing beyond her grasp, pivoting in spirals, and air rapidly arose over an ebbing tide. Moving slowly from the Pacific, the balls of her feet pointed from sea to shore. Then, on tiptoes, she hurried forward to darkened sand, and his white scent became a sky of midnight blue, feathered over an ocean of time, held in a palette of song in cadence. Invisibly, he brushed her hair beneath the setting sun. He brought salt to her lips when her tongue still tasted his fullness. The wind, he spoke her name, calling, "Distance will not make us blind. Darkness will not make you blind. Raise your face and look." The horizon reflected in her eyes when no trickery of light played from rock faces, when no cicadas were heard, and then when no birds sang to the horizon. Her eyes reflected a solitary star, burning brighter than any sun, whose name she spoke. In purity and in innocence, her mouth closed. Over a painted sand, her eyes sang a solo of smooth crescendo. She moved into silence, dispersed fragrant light, become her, and the two saw the longingly heard, each the other's ghost, the longing now seen in sea light of a Luna sonata.